في عقد الأشعري وفقه مالك وفي طريقة الجنيد السالك.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا محمد أشرف المرسلين وحبيب رب العالمين وعلى آله وصحبه حق قدره ومقداره العظيم. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam was sitting with his companions one day when a man who looked to have been a traveler, but the sign of travel wasn't upon him, entered upon their majlis, and he began to ask the Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam about al-Islami wal-Iman wal-Ihsan. When he left the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam, he said to his companions, and that was Jibreel coming to teach you your deen. The structure of Ibn Ashir, the Matn of Ibn Ashir, al-Murshid al-Mu'in, the helping guide, is to ensure that the reader, because it initially started as a book for Hajj and explaining the rulings of Hajj and Umrah, but the author then grew the Masail to answer the number of questions that the students had or the needs that the students had, because this is what a proper teacher does. They look at the need of their students and their community. And we see from him the attempt to show us the 5 pillars of Islam. Does this mean that in terms of fard ayn, that there isn't any fard ayn upon us besides the 5 pillars of Islam for us to study fiqh in? La. In fact, if you are in an industry or some sort of professional, a medical professional, maybe you're a stockbroker, maybe you have different, maybe you're a lawyer or an accountant or a business consultant or whatever you want to, whatever field that you're in, there are ahkam for it in terms of the deen. And it is mandatory upon you as a Muslim for you to go and to ask and to seek knowledge. Because as we will see, inshallah, as we will see, inshallah ta'ala, the author here is going to explain to us the overall reward and benefit for the one who is seeking not just what is the 5 pillars of Islam, but to act upon the fiqh that is required for them to learn. And so the broader message to our ummah is that we are not to do a single thing until we know the hukum of Allah in it. Is this haram, halal, mubah, makruh? What terminology is this under? Or what category is this under in terms of the rulings of the deen? And as your brother who is giving nasiha first to myself before the rest of us, it is upon us to be experts in fiqh, experts as much as we can in our specific industry. You don't need to be mufti. You just need to be an expert, in the sense that if somebody were to ask you, hey, is it halal for me to trade stocks on this particular product, right? Is it halal for me to give treatment to a woman in this particular environment, etc., etc.? You'd be able to say halal and haram. You'd be able to say avoid it or stay with it. You live upon certainty, and there is no greater blessing than to live upon certainty. Living upon certainty and clarity is the best, greatest blessing ever, because you are far from the fitna of shaitan. Now, in today's session, inshallah, we're going to pick up from where we left off. I understand we sometimes aren't reading directly from the text, but this is for the specific need or reason that we want to ensure that we're getting the core understanding of what the author is intending, inshallah ta'ala, and the primary discussions. Okay, as this is more of like a fard ayn class, and it's meant for generally everybody, not necessarily students of knowledge, but just like Muslims, everyday Muslims. We don't go deep into specific topics, but a lot of the discussions around the purification of the heart affects many of us, and we should be serious about learning it. طيب. Bismillah. I'll just move my, gotta move my notes around here. A little bit of a different setup today. But inshallah ta'ala, hopefully this will be. طيب. I think for students, if you're looking, beyond this class and you want to kind of have this book handy, Murshid al-Mu'in, but you're looking for a copy or an edition, try to find the copy of Ali Laraqi's Laraqi. I'm not sure. Forgive me for the pronunciation of the last name, but Shaykh Ali Laraqi's translation of Ibn Ashir. I think he does a good job overall with it. Alhamdulillah, I've been reading through it throughout this course just to kind of pair a lot of because going from Arabic to English can sometimes be a little different, right? So you often want to, if you're teaching a class, you want to look at what other contemporary scholars or other teachers, what they use for terminology and how they structure the same text that you studied and the same shuruhat. And in this case, Ali Laraqi is using the Sharh of Mayara, but he's also utilizing al-Habr al-Mateen, which is a very good additional text too, which we studied with Dr. Walid Shawish through Wise University. And yeah, mashallah ta'ala, and mashallah, it's a very good. He has a hashia on it, and it's a very good hashia too. I mean, Dr. Walid, his hashia on that book. Essentially, what we want is good understanding. So let's continue bi'idhnillah. طيب. We're on the topic of, let's see here. Bismillah. قوله رحمه الله. نعم. فقال كغيبة نميمة زور كذب. This section builds upon the previous discussion that we had about guarding one's gaze, hearing, and speech. The first key word here is namima. The Prophet ﷺ, he says in a well-known hadith, "Shall I not tell you who the worst people are? They are those who carry tales to create division amongst the brothers." Meaning that they commit namima. Namima is gossip, and it is worse than backbiting. It's worse than backbiting because gossip involves both backbiting and causing division amongst people, and it's one of the gravest sins that one can commit. And causing fitna, it's because of the ripple effect of simply just gossiping in and of itself. The Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he warns about this, and he says, "Do not obey every habitual swearer, scorner, and going about with malicious gossip," in Surah Al-Qalam. And this shows that gossiping in and of itself is a sign of a corrupt heart, and it destroys relationships. The Prophet ﷺ, he also said, someone who is a gossip mongerer will not enter paradise. Will not enter paradise. I think this has a more profound effect when we think about social media and conversations that could possibly happen behind the scenes. When people are always online and having conversations, and they're going through the trends, and we kind of see with apps like TikTok and Instagram, and you can do stitches and you can kind of retweet and repost a lot of different content, and much of the content is clipped, meaning we actually don't even know what the person even said. Sometimes it's a very problematic person, like an extremely problematic person. I don't want to mention names because I don't want to be somebody who at the same time is committing these things, right? But we know problematic people from social media that oftentimes say quite problematic things. But if you dig deeper, you realize that those problematic things that we think they have said were in actuality clips that were taken completely out of context. And in many cases, they followed up with an explanation to what they meant. Now, it could be an opinion, it could be right or wrong, but it certainly wasn't malicious what they had said. Or at least we could say that we don't think that there was malicious intent. But now, because we've spread it far and wide, it has the effect of what? namima, and worse, in its worst form. And we've carried the sin of gossiping, of backbiting, of causing division, because now in your social media post, bismillah, your social media post, you went in on this person. Oh, you kept talking and talking and talking and saying, look at how problematic this person is, and look at what they have said, etc., etc., etc. And it turns out they haven't even said such a thing. And the comment section is going crazy. This is really important for us, that when news is being shared and spread, that we hold our tongues and we wait for people of knowledge or hikmah. It doesn't have to be necessarily a scholar, but it can be somebody who has good character, somebody who is an upright Muslim. You wait to see how they're reacting and you pause. And you look at those who are more careful about their words and careful about their criticisms. And likewise, we should be like those people. Careful about your criticism. You wait and you listen. You don't necessarily have to formulate an opinion, nor do you have to take a side. Sometimes you just need to just take a step back and let things cool off. And these are the best of people. When you know people who are neutral, who are not here or there, and by being neutral, you're supporting the truth. By being neutral and taking a step back and cooling off, you're supporting everyone's ability to, number one, protect themselves from being accused of something that they haven't done, and number two, possibly being on the side of those who are accusing, in the sense that if they are telling the truth and if they have brought evidence and all of these kinds of things, then you wait for that to appear, right? Before you say, hey, you're a liar for accusing this person of this. Bismillah. Meaning you just don't take any sides. Another possible disease of the heart is false testimony, or shahadat al-zur, and it's another form of taking of having negative speech, and it's another form of having some sort of dishonest speech, because in the Quran Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala explicitly forbids it in Surah Al-Hajj. He says, so avoid the filth of shirk, of idolatry, and shahadat al-zur, and avoid the false testimony. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he said in a hadith, he said, shall I not tell you one of the gravest sins? The companions, radwanullahi alayhim, they said, yes, yes, O Messenger of Allah. He alayhi salatu wasalam said, ashirku billah, associating partners with Allah, disobedience to your parents, and false testimony. So if you notice this order, disbelieving in Allah is possibly the worst sin, right? It is the worst sin, number one. Disobedience to your parents, the Prophet ﷺ elevates the obedience to the parents, birrul walidain, above so many other deeds that one can do to be an honorable deed. And likewise, the opposite of that, which is disobedience, is likewise one of the most harmful things that one can do. And here, along with that, as a third, false testimony. And he kept repeating false testimony until the companion said, we wished he had stopped out of concern for him. Meaning he emphasized shahadat zur. Why? Because lying, or lying under an oath, or bearing false witness, is amongst the greatest of sins. Because you harm the other person that you're accusing of. Because it's not even just like, it's not even, the person is completely free of the accusation. But because of your position, because of your accusation that has false pretenses, it's complete fabrication, it corrupts justice and it harms the innocent. The third disease of the heart that the author alludes to or talks about is al-kadhib, or lying. And it's one of the defining traits of al-munafiqun, the hypocrites. In Surah An-Nahl, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he says, indeed, it is only those who do not believe in the signs of Allah who fabricate lies, and it is they who are liars. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam has said, truthfulness leads to rightfulness, birr, yani sidq leads to birr. And righteousness leads to paradise. And a man will keep speaking the truth until he is written as a truthful person, Siddiq, in the sight of Allah. In contrast, he alayhi salatu wasalam says, lying leads to fujur or wickedness, and wickedness leads to hellfire. A man will keep lying until he is written as a liar, kadhab, in the sight of Allah. So all of this begins with a decision. Am I going to be a truthful person, or am I going to be a liar? If I'm a truthful person, then my actions will reflect the truth. And if my actions are dishonest, if I am a liar, then my actions will reflect the actors of hell, the people who are in hell, the people who deserve Jahannam. وَبِئْسَ الْمَصِيرُ. May Allah protect us from Jahannam and deliver us into paradise. Allahumma ja'alna min as-siddiqeen. The next is false speech, which we talked about briefly, or which we talked about currently in like the last minute or so. And false speech, the consequences of having or carrying false speech and kadhib and lying and sowing discord and false testimony are four. The first is that it leads to hypocrisy. Alayhi salatu wasalam said the sign of hypocrisy are three. The signs of a hypocrite are three. When he speaks, he lies. When he promises, he breaks it. And when he is trusted, he betrays. If you know the prophets, the character of a prophet, prophetic character is the complete opposite of a hypocrite. Prophetic character is that when he speaks the truth. When he promises, he never breaks his promise. And when he is trusted, he never betrays. Right? Because we said that it's logically impossible for a prophet to be a liar, for a prophet to be dishonest, and for a prophet to be dishonest and untrustworthy. Subhanallah. The second consequence of false speech is that it distances one from Allah, and it weakens one's connection with Allah Ta'ala, and it makes the heart insensitive to sin. The third is it ruins one's reputation. If you're a habitual liar, you lose all credibility. Once people know that you lie all the time, no one will respect you. No one will want to be associated with you. You can't even keep your story straight. Nobody wants to be associated with somebody like that. Number four is that it leads to greater sins. It leads to greater sins because a liar eventually becomes more comfortable with deception. And deception in and of itself has many implications. It opens the door to cheating and betrayal and even oppression or dhulm. Those are the four consequences of false speech. It leads to hypocrisy, it distances one from Allah, it ruins one's reputation, and it leads to greater sins. May Allah protect us from this. Ameen. So speak the truth and speak it clearly so that people know that you are not someone who is dishonest. Ibn Ashir, in his discussion of taqwa, warns against acts that corrupt the heart and distract from spiritual growth. And in this, we kind of have a side discussion on entertainment, idle entertainment, and musical instruments. Because the principle is that a seeker of Taṣawwuf does not act on whims or personal inclinations. He only acts upon what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has commanded of this action. Is it mubah? Is it halal? Is it haram? Is it makruh? Is it mandub? So forth and so forth. And so before they go and act on anything, they seek divine guidance before engaging in it. And it leads us to the prohibition of musical instruments from the perspective of the school of Imām Malik, rahimahullah. Many of the scholars of the madhab went into the direction of forbidding generally the use of musical instruments. In Arabic, those musical instruments are called ma'azif, as they lead to ghafla, heedlessness, and distract from the remembrance of Allah. This can include stringed instruments like the oud and lutes and similar. It can also include wind instruments like flutes and reed pipes and so forth. And it could also include other forms of musical entertainment associated with gatherings of immorality. For example, a DJ can sit on a like an electrical piano and make sounds. Those sounds are not necessarily stringed instruments, nor are they wind instruments. They're just like beats, percussion beats, right? But they're done in such a way that causes for a number of issues, right? In terms of what we're talking about, of gatherings of immorality. However, there seems to be an exception in fiqh regarding permissible instruments, and that includes the def or the daf, which is a simple drum. And this drum you will see in occasions like weddings or warfare. A large drum, and they would hit it, boom, boom. They might use it in the mawlid as well. It's just a large drum. And it's used for specific joyous occasions. A farah. The second is a nay, or a specific type of reed flute. And some scholars, they all allowed it only in weddings, with karaha, for hiring musicians to play those instruments. And I believe that this is an important point, because where we see some expansion from the fuqaha and the Maliki school seems to be connected directly with the context of weddings and afrah, or specific joyous occasions, right? And the specific joyous occasions, I'm not really somebody to like express the depth of that. So I'm just gonna leave it at specific joyous occasions, and we should look at the people of wara', meaning the people of who are conservative in their actions and conservative in their beliefs, and careful about their deen and so forth, and see how they react to instruments and their use in joyous occasions. But specifically, I have seen it in the mawlid, and I have seen it in weddings, right? The use of some instruments, and weddings being a little bit more expressive on the instrument side. I'm sure everybody can relate to that, and has many stories of weddings and the things that go on in it. And it's something that we kind of have to be a little bit more careful of, right? Of course, we don't want to begin someone's life, or two individuals' lives together, with sin and haram and fasad, but we should be doing it with the right principles. And يعني Imām Ad-Dasuqi rahimahullah, he mentions in his Hashiyah, his Hashiyah on the Sharh al-Kabir, he says the permissibility of the daf and nay is limited to weddings, but their hiring for payment is disliked to prevent it from leading to widespread use in other occasions. And this is kind of where the simple instruments are conditionally permitted. Stringed and wind instruments remain prohibited in general circumstances. Wallahu a'lam. There is a hadith from the Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam about the end of times, and this is what causes a lot of scholars to be reserved about the use of such instruments, but also other things. The Prophet alayhi salatu wasallam warns about people who will make lawful or istihlal what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has forbidden, which includes music. He alayhi salatu wasalam said, there will be among my ummah people who legalize fornication, silk, wine, and musical instruments, and ma'azif. Some people will settle near mountains, and when a poor person comes to them for a need, they will say, come back tomorrow. But Allah will destroy them at night, causing the mountain to collapse over them, and others will be transformed into apes and pigs until the day of judgment. The transformation and the end of this hadith, Allah knows best. Second, what we understand here from the hadith itself are 3 points. The first is that some will justify forbidden things, meaning haram things, by renaming them or changing their definition and saying, technically it's something else, right? They'll reword something that's haram into something that's halal. Music and alcohol will become widespread in the ummah, and divine punishment will come upon such people who commit these acts, including transformation and destruction, and Allah knows best. And so when we look at today's situation with instruments and music and this mas'ala in general, musical instruments and immoral songs have become widespread, and many try to justify music by claiming its prohibition is unclear. However, the entertainment culture has normalized heedlessness and sinful gatherings and immorality. And the evidence that we have from Quran and Sunnah and the aqwal, or the positions or the fatawa of the scholars of the fuqaha of the Mālikiyyah, points to a clear prohibition of instruments, even in the limited context of weddings. And so if one were to exercise taqwa, then the mas'ala of music should be one where we're a little bit more careful with how we proceed. May Allah Azza wa Jal protect us and guide us. So, in practice, we should avoid any unnecessary musical entertainment that distracts from ibadah. We should limit permissible joys to what the Sharia allows, such as the deaf in weddings. And we should be cautious of any sort of modern day justifications for sinful indulgences. When we look at kind of the I mean, it's a little bit more expanded, the discussion on it. But if we even look at kind of the market of music and the industry of music, we know that there's a lot of haram in it. We know that there's a lot of um, that there are a lot of entertainers that dress inappropriately, that speak on inappropriate topics, and they try to shed light on more shaitanic ideas and pushes from the shaitan and pushes from the jinn and all of these things that are not prophetic in their character and not Islamic in their perspective, right? These are things that we want to stay away from. In addition to that, the discussion on lowering of the gaze becomes an important discussion, particularly in today's environment and world, as we find ourselves mixing between genders and being in environments where men and women could possibly be in a compromising position or situation. And so the prohibition of gazing at non-mahram women, especially in a sensual or desirous manner, is haram. The school of Imam Malik makes certain distinctions in terms of gazing. The first is that looking at a non-mahram woman for no reason is haram. Looking at her in a way that may lead to temptation is haram بالتشديد, haram with like an emphasis. And looking at her hands and face without desire is possibly permissible, right? And there would have to be a need for that. Al-Qarashi in his Sharh of Mukhtasar Khalil, he says a free woman's, a regular, a non-mahram woman's entire body is awra, except for her face and hands, and looking at them is only allowed if there is no fear of temptation. And obviously this goes into the discussion about the niqab and all of those other things. And the hukm on the niqab is simply just as we see from Sharh al-Dasuqi and Sharh Kabir, Hashiyah of Dasuqi. We see it from what Dardir mentions as well, and the scholars of the school of Malik, that it's tied to the issue of fitna. It's tied to the issue of fitna, right? And a young beautiful woman, if she fears fitna, she should cover her face, right? Everybody wants to focus on men when it comes to hijab and tell men to look down and all of these things. It's true. You should be looking down. You should also be aware of your appearance and make sure that you're collecting yourself and not attracting attention to yourself. It goes both ways. It goes both ways, right? We should be worrying about causing problems for others. We're Muslims. We care about others as much as we care about ourselves. So if I am somebody who may cause fitna for people, right, as a woman, then I should be covering myself and making sure that I'm following what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has commanded me to do in terms of my body and my form. And Allah knows best. Then, rahimahullah, he says, نعم يحفظ بطنه من الحرام يترك ما شبه باهتمام. He protects his stomach from the forbidden. He avoids doubtful matters with concern. And In terms of the prohibition of consuming unlawful wealth, it is obligatory to protect one's body from harmful sustenance, stolen wealth, usurped property, money obtained through deception or oppression, and anything unlawfully acquired, whether from a Muslim or non-Muslim. The Prophet ﷺ said, any flesh that grows from unlawful earnings, the fire is more deserving of it. The scholars, they unanimously agreed that if lawful sustenance is available and it is permissible to consume unlawful, it is, if lawful sustenance is available, it is impermissible to consume unlawful food out of convenience or greed. We should only be consuming what's halal to eat from the rizq that is halal, that brought it to us. The awliya would ensure that even their lawful food was free from any doubt, following the principle, if I had no food except unlawful provision, I would rather starve than consume it. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us this taqwa and this wara' with how our income comes in and how we consume our food. It's not simply just somebody put the label of halal on it, but you look at what you are paying for your food with and how exactly you came to that money and that income. May Allah give us halal income, halal rizq, because there's barakah in it and there's khair in it and there's good in it. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allow us to consume only what is halal for us from what Allah Azza wa Jal commanded. Then the discussion carries into avoiding what is doubtful in aligning to Islamic principles regarding unlawful substances. And that includes al-mayta, wal-dam al-masfuh, wa-lahm al-khinzir. Mayta being carrion, meaning like dead animals, the flesh of dead animals that are not slaughtered Islamically. Right? And of course, we know of these of the rulings of hand slaughter and machine slaughter. Machine slaughter is a little bit different. There are some rulings about that, and there are scholars who agree to its permissibility, and some scholars who disagree. It's a modern issue, right? And so, if one has more questions about that, delve into the fatawa. I'm not the person. I'm not a mufti, so I'm not going to be deep on that topic. Dam al-masfuh is flowing blood, which is haram for us as well. And lahm al-khinzir, because there's clear text on lahm al-khinzir. And that which is sacrificed for other than Allah, meaning sacrifices for idols or deities, can't eat that meat. The Quran says in Surah Al-Ma'idah, حُرِّمَ عَلَيْكُمُ الْمَيْتَةَ, forbidden to use carrion, ad-dam wa lahm al-khinzir, and that which has been dedicated to other than Allah. This includes any intoxicants or substances that corrupt the body and mind, every muskir, alcohol and all intoxicants, al-khamr wal-muskirat, hashish and opium and other drugs that are similar to it, inhaled or injected intoxicants. And there is a discussion on tobacco and smoking and narcotics and so forth. Anything in general that causes some sort of intoxication or significant harm, many of the scholars remarked about it to be haram. And in terms of the significant harm, one would have to go and delve a little bit deeper into this discussion. And Allah knows best. Ibn Ashir, he's also stressing here that a Muslim must ensure that their earnings and possessions are purely lawful, which we covered. And so, if we are to be people who are thankful for the rizq that Allah has given us, we are to use it in the right and correct way and consume the correct rizq from Allah, the halal rizq from Allah, and leave off what is haram for us. ثم قال يحفظ فرجه ويتقي الشهيد. He safeguards his chastity and he fears the all-seeing one, a shaheed. In Surah Al-Mu'minun, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, and those who guard their chastity, meaning like the ones who he's praising, those who guard their chastity, those who protect themselves from zina and committing illicit desires, and it's an essential part of taqwa. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he he warned us. He said, no sin after shirk is greater than a man placing his private part in what is unlawful. May Allah protect us from this. Ameen. And so this includes avoiding places of zina or temptation, of fitna, lowering the gaze, غض البصر, and avoiding khalwa with non-mahram women. And this is beyond important today, because khalwa itself is not just about like being in a room and a meeting room at work. It's about communicating online. It's about watching videos that we're not supposed to, and seeing programs and television and matters of on screen or on our devices that are not supposed to be there. One of the worst things that we can do is bring our devices into the bathroom and the restroom. This is not a good thing. It's both literally, materially disgusting, germs and so on, but also for our spirituality, this is no good. And there's even scholars who talk about watching something while eating, meaning watching television while eating, and the problems that has, and the effect that has on people's stomachs and intake, and all of these things. May Allah protect us from it. And so when Allah Azza wa Jal, He says, وَلَا تَقْرَبُوا الزِّنَا, it means don't even get close to zina, meaning stay away from even the actions that would lead you to it. So what of us being around non-mahram women or non-mahram men all day, appearing and decorating ourselves and adorning ourselves and beautifying ourselves, going to places that may be more dominant in one gender than the other, putting ourselves in an environment that is disrespectful to Allah, to the Rasul, to the Deen, to our spouses, to our families and sisters and mothers and brothers and fathers, and all of these situations. And so it's best for us to practice extreme caution with how we go about our day. Not to be impractical in the sense of like, like I'm not going to go into any space that has women in it, including the supermarket or khalas. If there's a marketplace and there's women and men, and this is a marketplace, right? By its nature, it's going to be a place that everybody comes to. But if we have situations such as you on your cellular device are communicating with somebody in electronic khalwa, there is a problem there, is it not? May Allah protect us from this. ثم قال, guarding the hands and feet from sin, في البطش والسعي لممنوع يريد, in aggression and striving towards what is prohibited, he restrains himself. And this means that a Muslim must avoid using their hands and feet for sinful acts, stealing or harming others, البطش, and walking towards haram gatherings or places of sin, السعي إلى الممنوع. فقال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم, the feet of a servant will not move on the day of judgment until he is asked about how he used them. La ilaha illallah. And is this not something that we have to be careful about? Where did you walk to with your feet? The ni'mah that Allah has given you. Where did you place yourself in this life? Is this not something that you should be afraid of and have fear of and have taqwa of? Because truly your limbs will testify against you on the day that there is no repeating. There's no going back. You can't go back and repeat your life. Khalas, your deeds are complete. Your book is done. Ibn Ashir warns against engaging in doubtful matters, as they can lead to haram. Doubtful matters are known as ash-shubuhat. He must protect himself from ash-shubuhat, which are those that lack clear rulings. The Prophet ﷺ said, al-halalu bayyin wal-haramu bayyin. But between them are doubtful matters, shubuhat, that many people do not know. Whoever avoids these doubtful matters has protected his deen and his honor, his religion and his honor. The way you avoid these doubtful matters is by having ilm, studying, and having a thirst or hunger for being someone who studies Ibn Ashir, who goes and studies other books and asks scholars and joins the company of the righteous and all of these other matters that are beneficial to the development of your soul and heart and your closeness to Allah. Doubtful matters, they include things such as transactions, where the permissibility of them are unclear, foods that may contain unlawful ingredients, or actions that may or may not lead to sin or temptation. And these shubuhat, they arise because, number one, there is some sort of tashabuh or doubt in the clarity of rulings. You're not really sure what's halal and haram. There is also a mix between lawful and unlawful elements, so much so that you're not sure what's halal and what's haram and what you're doing. because you came into this thinking it's halal, but now you're starting to see haram elements, but you're not sure anymore, and it's like the train is leaving the station, as we say, right? And you're not really sure like how to proceed. There's a lot of pressure here. So the safest path is to avoid anything that's uncertain and to seek knowledge before we act. So this is what he means by saying وَيُوقِفُ الْأُمُورَ حَتَّى يَعْلَمَ مَا اللَّهُ فِيهِنَّ بِهِ قَدْ حَكَمَ. We said this earlier, but this is what that line is intending. And it's such an important line, and it's critical to how we proceed as Muslims. And the attribute of wara, or caution, is the safest path when faced with matters that are mutashabih or shubuhat. May Allah protect us from this. Ameen. ثم قال واعلم بأن أصل ذي الآفات حب الرياسة وطرح الآتي. He said, and know that the root of all afflictions is the love of leadership and disregarding what is to come. The root of spiritual corruption is love of power and prestige. Ibn Ashir is talking about here. So حب الرياسة is seeking status, control, or dominance over others. Sorry. So the root of spiritual corruption begins with love of power. And it is also the neglect of the hereafter, being entirely absorbed in worldly matters with no concern for the afterlife. And so a person who is obsessed with worldly leadership and reputation, they will inevitably fall into hujub, arrogance, and hasad, jealousy. They'll fall into riya, or ostentation, or a tama, meaning greed. And the dangers of seeking such a status, may very well lead that individual to Jahannam wa bi'sal masir. May Allah protect us from that. Ameen. A true seeker of Allah, therefore, does not chase after leadership, but remains content with Allah's decree. And the scholar states, leadership, I should say power, does not chase after power, does not chase after dunya. They seek more from what Allah Azza wa Jal can provide for them. And so in many of the commentaries, the scholars talk about that worldly power often leads to heedlessness, or ghafla, and prevents one from true service to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The Prophet ﷺ, he said, 2 hungry wolves set loose among sheep do not cause more destruction than a man's love for wealth and status than a man's love for wealth and status does to his religion. May Allah protect us. Ameen. And so true liberation comes when liberation from all of the diseases and all harm and all of this dunya comes when the individual turns to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala alone. So Ibn Ashir rahimahullah alludes to a specific verse in the Quran where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in Surah An-Naml, is he not better? Is he who responds to the desperate when he calls upon him? The way that we escape the worldly desires and the challenges that we have and the oppression that we face and the obstacles that come before us are through doing something very simple, which is turning to Allah and seeking help and seeking aid and seeking support from the one who's the most high, the most excellent, the perfect, the all-powerful. Subhanallah. And it's essential that the servant of Allah on the path to purification realizes their helplessness before Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They reflect upon themselves. They see that this dunya is full of challenge and difficulty, that their heart is so riddled with disease, that they're incapable of fixing themselves. They become humble before Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and they feel helpless. And they realize and reflect upon the phrase, Hasbunallah wa ni'mal wakeel. Sufficient for us is Allah, and He is the best disposer of affairs. So whoever feels overwhelmed by worldly desires should increase the recitation of this ayah from the Quran, Hasbunallah wa ni'mal wakeel, for it brings tranquility and reliance upon Allah. The Imam then finishes the discussion, or this section, with talking about the Shaykh, because it is necessary to keep the company of a Shaykh, of instruction, of ilm, a qualified spiritual guide. He says, يصحب شيخا عارفا المسالك يقيه في طريقه المهالك. He accompanies a Shaykh who knows the spiritual path, who protects him from the dangers along the way. There are certain conditions that are prescribed or ascribed to a Shaykh, or a true Shaykh who you can follow and take as a spiritual guide, as a murshid. The first is that he must be a knower of the paths to Allah, ariful masalik. He must have deep knowledge of spiritual purification, yani of Taṣawwuf. He must be experienced in the journey of the soul, not somebody who's just like started last week and got ijazah. It doesn't make any sense, right? Right? It needs to be somebody who has deep knowledge of this matter. This is what the author is intending. He should not simply be a scholar, but a realized guide who has walked the path himself. The second is that he must be a means of protection from destruction. يَقِيهِ فِي طَرِيقِهِ الْمَهَالِكِ. The seeker left without a guide can fall into spiritual traps, such as ghurur, self-delusion, zuhd al-fasid, or false asceticism, and misinterpretation of divine realities. A Shaykh ensures that the seeker does not misinterpret spiritual experiences. He adds the condition, يَذْكُرُهُ اللَّهَ إِذَا رَآهُ. He reminds the seeker of Allah whenever he sees him. وَيُوصِلُ الْعَبْدَ إِلَى مَوْلَاهُ. And he connects the servant to his Lord. And the true Shaykh, he possesses the light of dhikr. His presence alone reminds people of Allah. His speech and actions and character inspire others towards righteousness. And he does not invite people to himself, but directs them to Allah alone. There are countless stories of awliya simply looking as somebody simply looking at the face of a wali and testifying La ilaha illallah Muhammad Rasulullah. This is the presence that those people have, the aura that they have, and it's something that when you look at a mountain of tasawwuf, a mountain of ilm, a mountain, it's like looking at the mountains, the awliya. You're just in awe. You can't believe what you are seeing. And they themselves are not people who are dramatic and all of these things. They're humble people. They're simple people. They are individuals who have deeply interpreted the understanding of Hasbunallah wa ni'mal wakeel, who have internalized La ilaha illallah Muhammad Rasulullah, who practice it in their life through and through. And so when you see the true Shaykh, you cannot doubt it. As for today, it's difficult to find the true Shaykh, because traditionally the murid would leave off everything of their spirituality and everything of who they were and entrust it in the care of the murshid. And the murshid would be the one who guides him. Pray this way, eat this, go into khalwa, and command them and guide them along this path of spirituality. But it's very difficult to trust someone in this day and age, as the time of fitna has grown and many charlatans and false guides have appeared. And so the best or the most immediate Shaykh that you can have is the Book of Allah and the Sunnah of the Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Then you have the books of the scholars. the books of Imam al-Ghazali, the books of Sīdī Ahmad Zarruq, the books of that you find in terms of the Riyadh al-Salihin and so forth, of the books that have been clearly taught by the teachers for you to begin to exemplify and practice in your daily life. I promise you, if you practice the Quran, if you practice the Sunnah of the Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and you work on yourself, you're going to find Jannah, inshallah. You're going to find the right path, inshallah, because there is huda and nur in the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. When asked about his character, alayhi salatu wasalam, the companions answered, khuluquhu al-Quran, that his character was the Quran. So you're not going to find yourself astray by trying to be a living and breathing and walking Quran, so to speak. So be serious about the Sunnah, be serious about the Quran, be serious about your fiqh, because the fiqh is your submission to Allah and following His rules, His halal and His haram. The conditions for the murid, he continues. He says that a seeker must also possess the qualities that make them ready for spiritual teaching, meaning that the murid themselves submit themselves completely to the guidance of the shaykh. Just as a sick patient entrusts their body to a skilled doctor, a murid entrusts their spiritual journey to a shaykh. The second is that they must be sincere in following the path, and they should not seek personal gain, fame, or shortcuts. That this is a long and gritty path. It's not romantic with hearts and beautiful roses, and it's not an Instagram reel. It's not a TikTok reel. It's real life. And this deals with your afterlife. Avoiding arrogance and self-reliance, like ujub and kibr. These diseases can prevent progress, and one has to constantly work on themselves. The greatest barrier between the murid and Allah is the illusion that he does not need guidance. And so take the advice of scholars. Take the advice of your brothers and sisters, those who are around you and supporting you. And remember that when something hurts you, somebody criticizes you and it hurts you, meaning like it makes you feel like you got burned, there might be some truth in that then. There might be some truth in that criticism for you to reflect on. And so the role of a shaykh becomes essentially a healer of the soul, that he knows the illness of the soul itself and he prescribes the right remedies. So if a seeker is affected by arrogance, the shaykh humbles them. Maybe he puts them to work cleaning the toilets. Maybe he puts them in service of the poor, and so on. If they are plagued by ghafla or heedlessness, the shaykh awakens them into their reality of what afterlife is. If they suffer from spiritual dryness, he revives their heart. Just as we mentioned, just as a sick person goes to the doctor, you go to the shaykh for him to revive your heart. ثم قال يحاسب النفس على الأنفس ويزن الخاطر بالقسطاط. He holds himself accountable for every breath, and he weighs his thoughts with the balance of justice. A seeker must learn to discipline themselves by being mindful of every action and intention, and filtering every thought through divine guidance, and measuring every deed against the scales of the Sharia. A sincere murid watches over their heart like a guard at the gates of a city, preventing harmful influences from entering. Ibn Ashir, he continues this discussion on Taṣawwuf, and he emphasizes the importance of understanding divine will and rejecting false attachment to worldly causes. Inshallah ta'ala, bi'idhnillah, next class we'll pick up from where we left off. We ask that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala blesses us and He guides us and He forgives us and He keeps us upon as-sirat al-mustaqim. Ameen ya Rabbil Alameen. طيب. Before we wrap up, I know we spoke a lot of the different terms, inshallah ta'ala. I'm looking to complete hopefully we're going to complete inshallah Ibn Ashir before Ramadan. But we want to make sure that we get all the sections that we need inshallah from this muqaddimah in Taṣawwuf. May Allah Azza wa Jal give us tawfiq, forgive us and guide us upon as-sirat al-mustaqim. طيب. Let me dive into the questions. Do we have any questions on YouTube? On our chat? let's get to chatting. Non-flowing blood, such as in the mouth, allowed to be consumed? In the mouth, yeah, it's going to be consumed anyways. It's still in the body that at that point, I believe. لكن الله أعلم. Assalamu alaikum. Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullah. Could you upload your notes if possible? I'm going to kind of put these all together and kind of create a little bit of a very short introduction to Taṣawwuf from Ibn Ashir's teachings, inshallah. So hopefully stay tuned for that. Maybe we'll put it on a slide that you can or something simple. All right. It seems that we're at a good point. Let's stop here. We'll resume next week, inshallah. وصلى اللهم وسلم وبارك على سيدنا ومولانا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم تسليما كثيرا والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.